Anthropic recently released a document which details their progress towards something called recursive self-improvement. We're going to go through that document today, but before we do that, I thought it would be good to understand what recursive self-improvement is. Recursive self-improvement is pretty simple to describe. It's an AI that makes itself better. It designs and trains its own successor, which is a much more capable version of itself, which then does the same. The loop just feeds itself. Now, for all of AI's history, every meaningful advancement has came with a person behind it. Recursive self-improvement is the point at which AI makes all of the meaningful advancements without the need for a human. And I guess the question is, okay, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that this type of loop could lead to something called the intelligence explosion. Some people call it super intelligence, some people call it intelligence runaway. It doesn't matter what name you give it, it's all the same thing. It's basically the creation of an entity that's orders of magnitude smarter than humans. Great. And have you ever tried to control something that is orders of magnitude more intelligent than you are? For example, has an ant ever tried to control you? I doubt it. So the question is, how do you control such a system? And the answer is, you don't. And to make matters worse, I think it's worth understanding what the AI labs currently understand about the language models that we have today, which is precisely nothing. And I'm serious. These AI labs know nothing about the models that they produce. And I think it's important to be precise about what I'm talking about here. So, what do we know and what do we not know? Well, we understand the engineering side really well. So how to design the architecture, how to scale the training, how to run the research. We know that to a T. What we don't understand is the model itself when it's produced. Once it exists, it's effectively just a black box. We kind of have some interpretability research, which is probing and trying to understand what's going on under the hood, but ultimately we really don't know what is going on inside these AI models. And given that context, how frightening is the prospect of allowing these models to iterate on themselves, make themselves more intelligent, and just lose complete control? It's not a great problem to have on your hands. None of this has happened yet, but this document is Anthropic's own account of how close they are to this recursive self-improvement. And we're going to make our way through it now. Okay, here it is. When AI builds itself, our progress towards recursive self-improvement and its implications. We are delegating a growing share of AI development to AI systems themselves, which is speeding up our work. No surprise there. Taken far enough and given enough compute, that trend points towards an AI system capable of fully autonomously designing and developing its own successor. This is called recursive self-improvement. We are not there yet, and recursive self-improvement is not inevitable. If you've been in the world of software for the past 6 months, 6 to 9 months, the reality seems like this is definitely inevitable, just given the pace of AI at the moment. Full recursive self-improvement also might increase the risks of humans losing control over AI systems. I mean, understatement of the year. This seems like a massive threat. It's not just to people's jobs either. This is a massive threat to the civilization itself. These AI labs really have a duty to make sure they concretely and robustly understand what these AI models are doing, why they're doing it, make sure they've solved the alignment problem before they deploy any more frontier models, and certainly any form of recursive self-improvement. These next series of graphics are Anthropic's way of showing the kind of abstraction of humans from software development in the field of AI. Props to Anthropic team for putting this together. It really demonstrates what's been happening in the world of software lately over the past few years, and the graphics and the way they've done it is really cool. Okay, starting with building the first Claude. This was 21 to 23. In the early days, work at Anthropic looked like work at any other tech company. People writing code and docs on laptop, and how they've depicted it here is a person working on a computer producing Claude. So yeah, good old-fashioned engineering. Okay, moving on. Chatbots 23-25. People used early chatbots to help with parts of the process, like generating short code snippets and copying the output into text editors. So the small snippets of code we're talking about are maybe functions, methods within a class, changes to configs, maybe log statements. Yeah, nothing too big. And what you can see here is the human working on a computer talking to a chatbot, probably has the chatbot on one side and their IDE on the other side, and eventually producing Claude. The human still very much involved in the process at this point. Okay, moving on. 25-26. Coding agents. As the agents became more capable, they were able to write and edit their own code, sometimes entire files. So at this point, vibe coding entered the market. No longer was the human doing the majority of the development work. The coding agents could handle a lot of the heavy lifting. Humans kind of well, some humans, not all humans, moved over to just prompting the language model to produce the output. They would describe to the AI what they want to do, handing off the implementation to the AI agent. And what you can see here is the person, again, behind the computer talking to the chatbot and using agents to produce and write all of their code. I would say that these coding agents were definitely able to understand and comprehend the code base to a much more significant degree, which enabled them to get the work done to a much higher standard. Okay, autonomous agents. This is where we are today. Agents can now run code themselves and delegate hours of work to other agents. So the agent framework now robustly understands the code base and delegates work out to sub-agents, which can work in parallel. They're doing things like writing the code, testing the code, refactoring the code, shipping, monitoring. Oh, monitoring is so useful with these autonomous agents. But yeah, what you can see here on the graphic is the person behind the computer talking into whatever their representation is, maybe Claude Code, maybe Cursor, maybe Codex, and the agent is able to delegate work out to these worker agents. And finally, closing the loop. In the future, agents could become capable enough to build and train models themselves. If this happens, future versions of Claude could be continuously improved by Claude itself. And this is it. This is recursive self-improvement. So what you can see here in this graphic that is absent compared to the others is, of course, the human developer, because eventually they're the ones that become the bottleneck. It's seemingly way more efficient just to have Claude handle everything. Quite a scary notion, if you ask me. What Anthropic are trying to depict by the density of the pixels is the amount or quantity of work that can be done using these tools. So significantly more being done here using recursive self-improvement. Okay, in these next two sections, Anthropic provides evidence that we're heading towards the singularity. And they do so by providing evidence from the outside world and internally within Anthropic. So here we're going to talk about the progression of Claude from a task completion perspective, how long Claude can operate uninterrupted when completing tasks, as well as Claude's ability to conduct research. The length of tasks that can be reliably complete on their own has been doubling roughly every 4 months, up from an earlier trend of doubling every 7 months. In March 24, Claude Opus 3 could complete software tasks that take humans about 4 minutes to complete. A year later, Claude 3.7 managed tasks that took an hour and a half. A year after that, Claude Opus 4.6 manage 12-hour tasks. This is definitely my experience with Claude. Even things like Claude's ability to continue in a thread. Historically, when you were heading towards the end of a Claude code session, when Claude needed to compact, Claude's answers would start to degrade. It would start to lose context, lose understanding of what's being done. Now it just seems like you can blast through multiple compaction sessions and Claude has no issues. It understands exactly what's being done, what needs to be done, and this kind of memory and information utilization seems to be way more efficient. If this trend holds, tasks that take a skilled person days could come into range this year. In 2027, AI systems could be capable of tasks that take a person weeks. I feel like this is going to be on us sooner rather than later. It seems like every milestone in AI comes faster than the last one did. Evidence from within Anthropic. Here they speak about where Claude is excelling within Anthropic, and they categorize it into two: engineering and research. So engineering is defined as writing the code, standing up the infrastructure, and overseeing the model training. Research is defined as deciding what experiments to run, interpreting what comes back, and figuring out which ideas to try next. So engineering is what the models are genuinely good at. Do you remember, code is just another language, and of course these are language models. Predicting the next line of code isn't different from predicting the next word in a sentence. It's just essentially a different vocabulary, a different syntax. The research is where the models seem to really struggle. And it's not that they can't produce or supply any new areas of research. They kind of combine things together to produce something new all of the time. What they're weak at is the kind of judgment of what to do next in a context of AI research. Sitting back, turning over an idea and deciding which new direction is actually worth choosing and having this more abstract high-level goal in mind. This is where the models struggle. The taste for what matters seems to be the gap right now. You can think of engineering research research as a restaurant. So you've got the kitchen, which would be the engineering side. That's where all the chopping, the cooking, the plating happens. And the research is the head chef, and he's deciding what's on the menu and what's even worth serving in the first place. In engineering, Claude can be handed an unspecified problem and figure out how to solve it. Humans supply the goal, but they no longer need to supply the method. So imagine in your restaurant, you're mid-service and you run out of an ingredient. Instead of telling Claude exactly what to substitute and why, you just say, Claude, can you handle this, please? And it can figure out what to swap, what to change, all on its own. And I say this in my personal use of Claude. I'll say, Claude, figure out that error and fix it. The laziest debugging session of all time. Large performance gaps exist when it comes to Claude exercising judgment and choosing goals in both engineering and research. That's the gap between AI today and future systems that could autonomously design its own successor. So what Anthropic is trying to say here is that AI is running the kitchen, but it's not able to design the menu at the moment. Claude isn't able to comprehend what the best direction is and why. It has no intuition of why a direction might give the best results and why a direction might give kind of poor results. I guess the question off the back of that is, can the transform architecture even do it? If we throw enough compute at it, if we scale it enough, maybe, but it's entirely possible that transformers won't get us there and we need some redesign of transformers or an addition to transformers, which I would welcome because it would slow things down significantly. Claude writes a significant proportion of Anthropic's code. As of May 26, more than 80% of the code we merge into Anthropic's code base was authored by Claude. Yeah, this is going to split the audience down the middle. It seems like if you're an engineer right now, you're either on the believer side or the skeptic side. The believers think that you're an engineer right now and you're kind of living this moment where your whole team is shipping using AI. It's not some experiment, it's just basically how things get done now. And for the skeptics, it's a measure of volume, not value. You can generate as much code as you want, but you're still going to have to do the same amount of work just by reviewing the code. The skeptics aren't doubting that the AI isn't writing the code. They're doubting whether you can actually trust the code without, of course, reading every single line. And the thing is, if you have to read every single line, then why would you not just write it in the first place? They go on to say, in the second quarter of 26, the typical engineer was merging 8 times as much code per day as they were in 24. This is because much of the code is written by Claude, with the engineer directing and reviewing rather than typing it themselves. This is no surprise, to be honest, and they show this in this graph here. So from Q4 25 to Q1 26, vibe coders entered the market. So you've got an explosion in contributions. This is where Opus 4.5 came out, significantly more capable model, especially in terms of writing code. And then, of course, we had Mythos. I thought it was very interesting to see Anthropic using Mythos. Mythos, of course, was this model that was posed to the world, this big scary model that we really need to be afraid of, and that it's too good to release to the world, but you know, it's totally fine to use within Anthropic. It's funny, these AI labs give themselves this posture to the outside world that they're do-gooders, they've got AI safety in mind, they're always doing all of the appropriate steps to take alignment as seriously as possible, yet when you see graphs like this, it's clear that internally they're just sending it as hard as possible. And I feel like most senior engineers are going to be cringing hard at this point, especially given this 8 times as much code being pushed. The fact that they're measuring it on the amount of lines being shipped. Lines of code is a terrible metric. It's a bit like measuring how good a book is based on how long it is. If anything, if you see 2 functions that do exactly the same thing and one has 50% less code, you would always choose that one. Code is much more valuable if it gets the job done with less lines, kind of just like a general consensus. There's a few caveats, but generally that is the consensus. And Anthropic caveat that down here, to be fair. Lines of code is an imperfect measure as it measures quantity over quality. So 8 times lines of code per engineer per day in the second quarter of 26 is almost certainly an overstatement of the true productivity gain. They go on to say, Anthropic research teams, the median respondent estimated that they produced around 4 times as much output with Mythos preview as they would have without access to any AI models. So they're producing 8 times as much code with 4 times as much productivity gain. So essentially the code is 50% less good as code that would have been written by a human. Nice. A significant fraction of Anthropic's technical staff is accomplishing their core work multiple times faster than they could without AI assistance. We also see evidence that people at Anthropic are using Claude to do work they simply wouldn't have happened otherwise, like building exploratory tooling and addressing long-deferred cleanup. For example, in April 26, Claude shipped over 800 fixes that reduced the class of API errors by a factor of 1,000. I mean, if the code was decent in the first place, maybe you wouldn't have had those API errors. The engineer overseeing Claude estimated that a human would have taken 4 years to complete this work. That is impressive. Solving other people's bugs is slow and painstaking, and humans struggle to hold that much unfamiliar context in their head at once. That is definitely true. I'd say reviewing other people's work is extremely taxing on your brain power, extremely boring as well. For me, this is where language models are genuinely at their best, refactoring and bug fixing. The code already exists, the model's got all of the context, and the job is simply just to improve what is already there. I know from my own work, this is exactly where Claude seems to excel. I often go through cycles of implementation, testing, shipping, and then I'll go back to the code a couple of weeks later, refactor it, and it seems to work really well. Okay, this chart is interesting. So this is measuring the success rate of Claude given different types of problems. So trivial tasks, routine tasks, substantial tasks, and open-ended problems. And as you can see, as time progresses and we're using better models, better harnesses, better coding tools, the success rate of tasks is increasing. What I found quite interesting is session success rate is determined by a Claude judge. This is definitely obvious. You're producing 8 times as much code. The question is how you're reviewing all of that code. You can't possibly expect a human to do that. And now we're kind of building a picture of the abstraction that is happening to human engineers, human developers. First we had humans writing the code and humans reviewing the code. Then we had AI writing the code and humans reviewing the code. And now we've got AI writing the code and AI reviewing the code. And humans are just moving further and further away from understanding the details. And it's actually quite a scary thought if you extrapolate this into the future, because you'll get to a point where the humans don't actually understand the implementation. They could understand it if they read it, but it just seems to be the case that humans are never going to get to the point of reading it, and you're just going to have these super intelligent systems that nobody understands or can potentially control, which is obviously not a good idea. Somebody somewhere has to maintain an understanding of the code. It's as simple as that. There isn't a full consensus among staff at Anthropic, but many believe that the Claude written code was still worse in quality than human written code at Anthropic in late 25, and it's roughly at parity now. We expect to be better within a year. We'll see if that happens. Okay, the next thing they talk about is accelerating research. Claude's job is to find speedups by rewriting the code, running it, timing it, and repeating. It's a miniature version of an experimental research loop. In May 25, Claude Opus 4 averaged a 3x speedup over the starting code. In April 26, Claude Mythos Preview was achieving a 52 times speedup, which is insane. So basically what they're trying to do here is improve the latency of their code for obvious reasons. I guess it speaks to what I said earlier about how useful Claude is when it comes to refactoring tasks. The goal's fixed, this success metric is fixed, or it's well defined, and Claude's job just to make it go faster, and it does it really, really well. Okay, what they discuss in this article is Claude's lack of ability to propose the direction for research. And what they're saying is that Claude is getting better at doing that, and it's a prerequisite to recursive self-improvement. Claude needs to understand what the best research direction is for it to conduct the research, get the results, and then improve itself. So being able to propose these experiments, execute these experiments, and execute the right experiments is really important. And they say here, Claude is getting better at proposing its own experiments. Now, you might sit back and ask the question, okay, you've got this language model. Why would the model care about picking any experiments to run? Why not just run everything? Well, the thing is, you're limited by compute, by silicon production, and ultimately you're limited by your energy supply. So you still need to pick the right experiments to run to be effective. And that's depicted in this chart here. It's a little bit difficult to understand, but in short, what we're seeing is when a human fails in the direction of an experiment, could the AI have gotten it right? And you can see the progression over time. So HiQ3, March 24, 22% of the time, it could have done a better job. Fast forward to April 26, Claude Mythos Preview could have done a better job 64% of the time. We view this result as an early sign that AI systems are getting better at making the kinds of judgment calls that AI research depends upon. So AI research needs these decisions to be very good to ensure that the direction of research is the most efficient possible. So what they're saying is these models are becoming more capable of understanding, planning, and making judgment calls in preparation for this recursive self-improvement. The comparative advantage of humans as of right now is still in seeing the bigger picture and thinking beyond the confines of the immediate task. So again, having this higher level goal in mind and being able to understand conceptually what is a good direction to go in. That's the advantage for humans. An area of human comparative advantage for now is research taste and judgment, including choosing which problems matter, which results to trust, and when an approach is a dead end. The thing for me is, it's a bit of an uncomfortable question, but beneath all of this, can you judge work that you couldn't do yourself? If we just take this from an engineering perspective, a senior engineer's judgment was built by years of writing, testing, and deploying code. If the next generation doesn't do any of that, where does the taste come from? What if we're wrong? God, I hope so. It's genuinely unclear whether today's training methods and architectures could unlock that capacity. They mean end-to-end recursive self-improvement. Can it be achieved with the architectures that we have today? And it's unclear at this point. But if they can't, what does the state of play give us? Even if we suppose that Claude never achieves good research taste, a conservative reading of our evidence still implies compounding acceleration. If humans spent most of their time on single-digit fraction work, that is direction setting, while Claude handles the rest, that means each engineer or researcher is steering far more work than before, just what's happening now. So if we continue down this path of using AI in its current state, where we set the direction and it runs the implementation, we'll still see multiplication effects in our productivity across society, which is great. Oh, the scary one, possible futures. Okay, they propose 3 possible futures, each scarier than the last. So future 1, the trend stalls, but today's AI capabilities are widely diffused. We may be approaching the bend in the curve where returns to scale diminish, the line straightens, then flattens. The judgment that separates a competent researcher from a great one might be a capability that cannot come from scaling up training inputs like compute and data. If so, getting past this bottleneck would require a new idea, like an architectural approach that supplements the transform architecture that all current frontier models use. So what they're saying is, maybe the trajectory we're on isn't a rocket, maybe it's an S-curve and we might be hitting the bend of the S-curve. And the bet is that the research taste is the thing that scaling can't buy. Getting past this would require a new idea, something that completely replaces the transformer entirely or supplements it. Now the thing is, Anthropic thinks this is unlikely. Even if we paused AI right now, we're still going to see massive ramifications that haven't really reached the wider market. We're just scratching the surface with these AI agents, and they're going to hit us like a ton of bricks as soon as they really do come to market. Even if model capabilities were frozen at today's level, we would expect major changes to occur in the world. Project Glasswing is one early sign. In its first weeks, Mythos Preview found more than 10,000 high-end critical severity software vulnerabilities across the world's most important systems. Pretty, terrifying. Okay, possible future number 2. AI labs continue to see compounding efficiency gain. In this scenario, AI development becomes substantially automated, but humans continue to set the research directions and judge results. So even if the end-to-end recursive self-improvement doesn't happen, the taste and judgment still resides with the humans. The implementation is done with the models. If such a scenario were to occur, what's the typical things we would see in society? Well, 100-person companies could do the work of 10,000 or 100,000 person organizations. Crazy. Basically, major productivity gains, but no real threat of this intelligence explosion. And finally, future number 3. AI systems themselves become capable of full recursive self-improvement and begin building their successors. If technical trends in advancing capabilities continue and AI systems are able to develop the capabilities inherent to transformative human ingenuity, then it's plausible that AI systems could design and refine themselves. This is recursive self-improvement. This is the intelligence explosion. This is superintelligence, all of the above. This is something I think we desperately need to avoid until we have a much more robust understanding of these models. We do not have good intuitions of what this world would look like because our economy is currently driven by humans and human-built tools. By its nature, a world driven by fast recursive self-improvement could become dominated by the self-improving model as its capabilities fully eclipse those of humans and the model proliferates across the broader economy. It is difficult to predict what the economy looks like if human labor stops being competitive. Discussing the economy under these conditions is a bit like complaining about a spilled drink before a tsunami. If you genuinely have a super intelligence that you reliably can't control, the economy is not the headline. Arguing about jobs and GDP assumes the world is still run on human terms and we're still the ones setting the goals. The whole point of this scenario is that we aren't going to be in control. We're not going to be the ones setting the goals. So worrying about the economy in that context, silly. This is something that we should not take lightly. This is something that we really need to avoid, and it's a really scary future. If it were possible to effectively slow down the development of this technology to give ourselves more time to deal with its immense implications, we think that would likely be a good thing. Likely be a good thing. The word likely there. Likely. Of course it would be a good thing. Come on. But if a slowdown simply lets the least cautious actors catch up technologically, it could leave everyone else safe. Without the global coordination mechanism, companies and governments will have to make difficult decisions about safety while under competitive and geopolitical pressures. Yeah, basically they're saying if we are going to slow down, then everybody's got to slow down. But to be honest, I welcome this type of message. I think they're right. Everybody needs to slow down. We're the market leaders. We're calling for a slowdown. Everybody should do it, kind of setting an example. But at the same time, in my head, I think if Anthropic weren't the ones in the lead, would they be calling for a slowdown? I doubt it. Everybody needs to slow down. Everybody needs to stop. We all need to just take a second, take a deep breath. That includes Anthropic, OpenAI, XAI, any of these Chinese companies. We need to get together, sit down in a room and say, look, let's all pause. Let's all relax. We've got these amazingly efficient systems. Productivity is going to go through the roof. How about we all just stop trying to understand these models in as much detail as possible, and when we do, maybe after that we can look at recursive self-improvement. A meaningful slowdown or pause would require multiple well-sourced labs at or near the frontier in multiple countries agreeing to stop under the same conditions. It would also require that each can verify that the actors have actually stopped. Is that even possible? Due to the unique characteristics of AI systems, the detectability element of this arms control problem is much more challenging than with other technologies. So they're basically saying, how do you know if somebody is training a frontier model? Training runs are far easier to conceal than missile silos. Those regimes took decades to build, both the infrastructure and the trust. We don't have that long. The infrastructure to detect other technologies that have the potential to wipe humans off the planet took decades, and for AI, we don't have that long. And not only do we not have that long, the threat from AI is significantly higher than it is from nuclear weapons. And that's it. That's the essay. Pretty terrifying, an interesting read. I would encourage everybody to go and read it themselves. My thoughts on this are, I, along with the majority of the other people in the world, would really welcome some kind of governmental intervention here. We need someone to step in on all of these frontier AI labs. We want to pause development until we have a much more firm understanding of what these models are, what they do, and how we could control them. And until we do that, I think humanity is under significant threat, not just from the models, but from these AI labs. What gives these AI labs the liberty to go and develop such a powerful weapon without some form of oversight? But look, this was my first breakdown of a paper. I really enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. Give me a like, stick a comment in the comments, tell me what I did good, what I did bad, and yeah, until the next one.